Book 10 of the Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus by Marcus Aurelius. Translated by George Crystal. Book 10. Wilt thou ever, O my soul, be good and single, and one, and naked, more open to view than the body which surrounds thee? Wilt thou ever taste of the loving and satisfied temper? Wilt thou ever be full and without wants, setting thy heart on nothing, animate or inanimate, for the enjoyment of pleasure, not desiring time for longer enjoyment, nor place, nor country, nor fine climate, nor congenial company? Wilt thou be satisfied with thy present state, and well pleased with every present circumstance? Wilt thou persuade thyself that all things are thine, that all is well with thee, that all comes to thee from the gods, and that what is best for thee is what they are pleased to give, now and henceforth, for the preservation of that perfected being, which is good, just, and beautiful, which generates, combines, embraces, and includes all fleeting things that dissolve to bring forth others like themselves? Wilt thou never be able to live a fellow citizen with gods and men, approving them, and by them approved? In so far as you are governed by nature only, observe carefully what nature demands. Then do that freely, if thereby your nature as a living being be not made worse. Next you must consider what the nature of a living being demands, and allow yourself everything of this kind by which your nature as a rational being is not made worse. Now it is plain that what is rational is also social. Therefore follow these rules and trouble no further. Whatever happens, nature has either formed you able to bear it or unable. If able, then bear it as nature made you able, and fret not. If unable, yet do not fret, for when the trial has consumed you, it too will pass away. Remember, however, that nature has made you able to bear whatever it is in the power of your own opinion to make endurable or tolerable, if only you conceive it profitable or fit to be borne. If a man is going wrong, instruct him kindly, and show him his mistake. If you are unable to do this, blame yourself, or none. Whatever happens to you was prearranged for you from all eternity, and the concatenation of causes had from eternity interwoven your existence with this contingency. Whether all be atoms, or there be a universal law of nature, let it be laid down first that I am a part of the whole which is governed by nature. Secondly, that I am associated with other parts like myself. Mindful of this, since I am a part, I shall not be dissatisfied with anything appointed me by the whole. For nothing is hurtful to the part which is profitable to the whole, since the whole contains nothing unprofitable to itself. All natural systems have this law in common, and the system of the universe has another law besides, namely, that it cannot be forced by any external cause to produce anything hurtful to itself. If therefore I remember that I am part of such a whole, I shall be satisfied with all that flows therefrom. And inasmuch as I am associated with parts like myself, I will do nothing unsocial, but rather draw to my kind, turn my every endeavor to the public good, and shun the contrary. In such a course my life must needs run well, just as you would hold that the life of a citizen runs well when he passes on from one public spirited action to another, and throws himself heartily into every task appointed him by the state. The parts of the whole, I mean the parts which are contained in the universe, must necessarily perish. Perish, let us say, meaning change. Now if it be a necessary evil for the parts to perish, it could not be well for the whole that its parts should tend to change, and be constructed to perish in various ways. Did nature then set out to injure her own constituent parts, making them so that they are liable to evil, and of necessity fall into it, or did it escape her notice that this comes to pass? Both suppositions are incredible. And if, dropping the notion of nature, one were merely to put it that things are constituted so, then how ridiculous at the same time to say that the parts of the universe are constituted so as to change, and also to wonder and fret at change or dissolution, as if it were something against the course of nature, especially as everything is dissolved into the elements out of which it arose. For there is either a scattering of the elements of which a thing was constructed, or a conversion of these, of the solid into earth, of the spiritual into air, so that these constituents are resumed into the system of the universe, which either undergoes periodic conflagration, or is renewed by never-ending changes. And do not imagine that you had all your earthly and aerial matter from your birth. For the whole of this was an accession of yesterday or the day before, from your food and from the air you breathed. It is this accession which changes, and not what your mother bore. And granting that this recent accession may incline you more to what is individual in your constitution, yet, I think, it alters nothing of what has just been said. Having taken to yourself these titles, good, modest, true, prudent, even-tempered, and magnanimous, look to it that you change them not, and if you should come to lose them, seek them straightway again. And remember that prudence means for you reasoned observation of all things, and careful attention, even temper, cheerful acceptance of the lot appointed by universal nature; magnanimity, the exaltation of the thinking part above any pleasant or painful commotions of the flesh, above vainglory, above death, and all such things. If you steadfastly maintain yourself in these titles, with no hankering after hearing them given to you by others, you will be a new man, and a new life will open for you. For to continue as you have been till now in the same life of distraction and defilement would mark you as a man devoid of sense, who clings to life like the half-eaten beast fighters, who, though covered with wounds and gore, do yet appeal to be reserved until tomorrow, to be cast again in their wretchedness to the claws and fangs that lacerated them before. Take your stand, then, on these few titles, and if you are able to abide in them, abide as one removed to the islands of the blessed. But if you perceive that you are falling away and cannot prevail, have the courage to retire into some corner where you may hope to prevail, or else depart from life altogether, not in anger, but in all simplicity, freedom, and modesty, having done at least one thing in life well by so leaving it. Now it will greatly help you to be mindful of your titles if you will recollect that the gods desire not adulation, but that reasoning beings should grow in likeness to themselves; and further, that a fig tree is set to bear figs, a dog to hunt, a bee to gather honey, and a man to do a man's work. Mimes, war, panic, sloth, servility, will wipe out the sacred maxims which you have gathered by observing nature and stored in your mind. You ought to look and act in every case so that not only shall the task before you be accomplished, but also your theoretic faculty exercised, and the self-confidence which springs from special knowledge preserved without ostentation or affected concealment. Will you ever attain to simplicity, to dignity, to a perfect discrimination in every case as to what a thing really is, what its true place in the universe, what the time it may endure, what its composition, to whom it may belong, and who can give and take it away? The spider exults when he has captured a fly; one man because he has taken a little hare, another because he has netted an anchovy, another because he has hunted down a wild boar or a bear, and another because he has conquered the Sarmatians. But are they not brigands all, if you look to their principles? Acquire a method of perceiving how all things change into one another. Pursue this branch of philosophy, and continually exercise yourself therein. There is nothing so proper as this for cultivating greatness of mind. He who does so has already put off the body, and, having realized how soon he must depart from among men and leave all earthly things behind him, he resigns himself entirely to justice in all his own actions, and to the law of the universe in everything else which happens. As for what any one may say or think of him, or do against him, he gives it not a thought, but contents himself with these two things: to do justly what he has in hand, and to love the lot appointed for him. Such a man has thrown off all hurry and bustle, and has no other will but this, to keep the straight path according to the law, and to follow God, whose path is ever straight. What need for suspicion when it is open for you to consider what ought to be done? If you see your way, proceed in it calmly, inflexibly. If you do not see it, pause and consult the best advisers. If any other obstacle arise, proceed with prudent caution according to the means you have, keeping always close to what appears just. That is the best to which you can attain, and failure in that is the only proper miscarriage. He who in everything follows reason is always at leisure, yet ever ready for action, always cheerful, yet composed. As soon as you awake, ask yourself, will it be of consequence to you if what is just and good be done by some other man? It will not. Have you forgotten what manner of men in bed and at table are those who make such display in praise and blame of others? What they do, what they shun, and what they pursue? How they steal and how they rob, not with hands and feet, but with their most precious part, whereby, if a man will, he may gain faith, modesty, truth, law, a good directing spirit. To nature, which gives and again resumes all things, the well-instructed modest man will say, give what thou wilt, take again what thou wilt. And this he says not with ostentation, but out of pure obedience and good will to nature. What remains to you of this life is little. Live as on a mountain, for it makes no difference whether we live here or there, provided we live like citizens everywhere in the world. Let men see and know you as a man indeed, living according to nature. If they cannot endure you, let them slay you. It is better so than to live as they live. Discourse no more of what a good man should be, but be one. Constantly imagine all time and all existence, and think that every individual thing is in substance a fig seed, and in time the turn of an augur. Consider each of the things around you as already dissolving, in a state of change, and as it were corrupting and being dissipated, or as one and all formed by nature to die. What sort of men are they when they are eating, sleeping, procreating, easing nature, and the like? Then see them lording it over their fellows, puffed up with pride, angry, or issuing judgments from on high. To how many were they slaves but lately? And why? And in what case will they shortly be? That is for the advantage of every man which is brought by universal nature, and for his advantage at the very time at which she brings it. Earth loves the rain, and the majestic ether loves. The universe loves to bring about whatever is coming to be. I then will say to the universe, what thou lovest I love. Is it not a common saying that so and so loves to happen? Either you are living here your accustomed life, or you are going abroad, and that at your own will, or you are dying, and your public office is discharged. Now besides these there is nothing. Be therefore of good courage. Keep this ever clear before you, that a country retreat is just like any other place. All things here go the same as on a mountain top, or on the sea beach, or where you will. You may always find that life of the wise man who in Platonic phrase makes the city wall serve him for a shepherd's fold on the mountains. What is my soul to me? What am I making of it, and to what purpose am I now using it? Is it void of understanding? Is it loosened and rent from the great community? Is it glued to and mingled with the flesh so as to follow each fleshly motion? Whoever flies from his master is a runaway. Our master is the law, and the lawbreaker is a runaway. And so is he also who through grief or anger or fear will not acquiesce in something that has happened, is happening, or will happen, in the course of things predestined by the all-ruling power which is the law, laying down for every man what is proper for him. He then who is afraid or grieved or angry is a runaway. He who has cast seed into the womb departs. Another cause takes and works upon it and completes the child. How wonderful the result from such a beginning! The child again takes food down its throat. Another cause takes and transforms it into sensation, motion, in a word, into life and strength and other things, how many and surprising! Consider then these things happening in such hidden ways, and view the power which produces them, just as we perceive the gravitation and levitation of bodies, not indeed with our eyes, yet none the less clearly. Continually reflect that all that is happening now happened exactly in the same way before, and reflect that the like will happen again. Place before your eyes all that you have ever known from your own experience or from ancient history, dramas and scenes all similar, such as the whole court of Hadrianus, the whole court of Antoninus, the whole court of Philip, of Alexander, of Croesus, all these were similar, only the actors different. Imagine every one who is grieved or storms about anything whatever to be like the pig in a sacrifice, which kicks and screams under the knife. Such, too, is he who on his couch deplores in silence by himself that we are all tied to our fate. Reflect also that only to a rational being is it given to submit to what happens willingly. The bare submission is a necessity upon all. Look attentively on each particular thing you do, and ask yourself if death be a terror because it deprives you of this. When you are offended at any one's fault, turn at once to yourself and consider of what similar fault you yourself are guilty, such as esteeming for good things, money, pleasure, a little glory, or the like. By fixing your attention on this, you will speedily forget your anger, especially if it occur to you that he acts under compulsion and cannot do otherwise. Else, if it be in your power, relieve him from the compulsion. When you have seen Satyrio the Socratic, think of Eutychus or Hymen. When you have seen Euphrates, think of Eutychio or Silvanus. When Alciphron comes before you, think of Tropiophorus, and when Xenophon, think of Crito or Severus. When you look upon yourself, think of any of the Caesars, and with every man likewise. Then let this occur to you: where now are these? Nowhere, or who can tell? For thus you will see all human things to be smoke and nothingness, especially if you call to mind that what has once been changed will never exist again through all the infinity of time. Why then this concern? And why does it not suffice you to live out your short span in well-ordered wise? What material, what a subject for philosophy you are shunning! For what are all earthly things but exercises for the rational power, when it has viewed all things that occur in life accurately and in their natural order? Abide, then, until you have assimilated all these things, as a strong stomach assimilates every variety of food, as a bright fire turns whatever you throw upon it into flame and radiance. Let no man have it in his power to say with truth of you that you are not a man of simplicity, candor, and goodness. But let him prove to be mistaken who holds any such opinion of you. This is quite in your power, for who shall hinder you from being good and single-hearted? Only do you determine to live no longer if you cannot be such a man, for neither does reason require in that case that you should. In the present matter, what is the soundest that can be done or said? For whatever that may be, you are at liberty to do or say it. Make no excuses as if hindered. You will never cease from groaning until your disposition is such that what luxury is to men of pleasure, that to you is doing what is suitable to the constitution of man on every occasion that is thrown or falls in your way. You should regard as enjoyment everything which you are at liberty to do in accordance with your own proper nature, and this liberty you have everywhere. Now to the cylinder it is not given to move everywhere with its proper motion, nor to water, nor to fire, nor to any other thing that is governed by a natural law only, or by a soul irrational. For there are many circumstances which constrain and stop them. But intelligent reason can pursue, through every obstacle, the course for which it was created, and which it wills to follow. Set before your eyes this ease with which reason makes its way through all obstacles, as fire goes upwards, a stone downwards, or a cylinder down a slope, and seek for nothing further. The rest of man's difficulties are merely of the body, the lifeless part of him, or else they are such as cannot crush or in any way injure him save through opinion or the surrender of reason itself. Otherwise he who suffered by them would himself straightway become evil. In the case of all other organisms, when mishap befalls, the sufferer is thereby rendered worse. But in this respect it may be said that a man becomes better and more praiseworthy by rightly using his circumstances. In fine, remember that nothing which hurts not the city hurts the man, who is by nature a citizen, nor does that hurt the city which hurts not the law. Now none of the things called misfortunes can hurt the law. Accordingly, what hurts not the law can hurt neither city nor citizen. To the man who is penetrated with true principles, the shortest, the most common hint is a sufficient memorial to keep him free of sorrow and fear, such as, "Some leaves the winds blow down, The fruitful wood breeds more meanwhile, which in springtide appear. Of men thus ends one race, while one is born. Your children are leaves; leaves, too, the creatures who confidently cry aloud and deal out eulogy, or it may be curses, or who carp and jeer in secret. Leaves likewise are they who transmit our fame to posterity. All these in springtide appear, then the wind shakes them down, and the forest grows more to take their places. Shortness of life is common to all things, yet you shun and pursue them as though they were to have no ending. But a little and you will fall asleep, and anon others shall mourn for him who carried your bier. The healthy eye ought to look on everything visible, and not to say, I want green, like an eye that is diseased. Sound hearing or sense of smell ought to be ready for all that can be heard or smelt, and the healthy stomach should be equally disposed for all sorts of food, as a mill for all that it was built to grind. So also the healthy mind should be ready for all things that happen. That mind which says, let my children be spared, and let men applaud my every action, is as an eye which begs for green, or as teeth which require soft food. There is no man so happily fated but that, when he is dying, some bystander will rejoice at the doom which is coming upon him. Were he a virtuous and wise man, will not some one at the last say within himself, at last I shall breathe freely, unoppressed by this pedagogue? He was not indeed hard on any of us, but I always felt that he tacitly condemned us. This they would say of a good man. But in my own case, how many more reasons are there why a multitude would rejoice to be rid of me? You will reflect on this when dying, and depart with the less regret when you consider, I am leaving a life from which my very partners, for whom I toiled and prayed and planned, are wishing me to be gone, hoping it may be to gain some additional advantage from my departure. Why then should one strive for a longer sojourn here? Yet let not your parting with them be less pleasant on this account. Preserve your own character, remain to them friendly, benevolent, gracious. On the other hand, depart from your fellow men not as if torn away, but let your going be like that of one who dies an easy death, whose soul is gently released from the body. Nature knit and cemented you to your fellows, but now she parts you from them. I part then as from relations, not reluctant but unconstrained. For death too is a thing accordant with nature. Accustom yourself as much as possible, when any one takes any action, to consider only, to what end is he working? But begin at home, and examine yourself first of all. Remember that the mover of the puppet strings is the hidden principle within. It is that which is eloquence, that which is life, that, if I may say so, which is the man. Never in your imagination confound that principle with the surrounding earthen vessel and the little organs that are kneaded onto it. Excepting that they grow upon us, they are like the carpenter's axe, since without the moving and restraining principle, none of these parts in itself is of any greater service than the shuttle to the weaver, the pen to the writer, or the whip to the charioteer. End of Book 10. Recording by Philip Gould.
Book 11 of the Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Book 11. These are the characteristics of the rational soul. It beholds itself. It regulates itself in every part. It fashions itself as it wills. The fruit it bears itself enjoys, whereas the products of plants and of the lower animals are enjoyed by others. It reaches its individual end, wheresoever the close of life may overtake it. In a dance or an actor's part, any interruption spoils the completeness of the whole action. Not so with the rational soul. At whatever point in its action, or wheresoever it is overtaken by death, it makes its part complete and all-sufficient, so that it can say, I have received what is mine. Also it ranges through the whole universe, and the void around it, and discerns its plan. It stretches forth into limitless eternity, and grasps the periodical regeneration of all things, seeing and comprehending that those who come after us will see nothing new, and that those that went before saw no more than we have seen. Nay, a man of 40, of any tolerable understanding, has, because of the uniformity of things, seen in a manner all that has been or will be. Characteristic of the rational soul also are love to all around us, truth, modesty, and respect for itself above all other things, which is characteristic also of the general law. Thus there is no discordance between right reason and the reason of justice. You will think little of a pleasing song, a dance, or a gymnastic display if you analyze the melody into its separate notes and ask yourself regarding each, does this impress me? You will blush to own it. And so also if you analyze the dance into its single motions and postures, and if you similarly treat the gymnastic display. In general, then, except as regards virtue and virtuous action, remember to recur to the constituent parts of things, and by dissecting to despise them, and transfer this practice to life as a whole. How happy is the soul that stands ready to part from the body when it must, and either to be extinguished, or to be scattered, or to survive. But let this readiness arise from individual judgment, not from mere obstinacy, as with the Christians, but deliberately, with dignity, and with no affected air of tragedy, so that others may be led to a like disposition. Have I done anything for the common good? Is not this itself my advantage? Let this thought ever be with you, and desist not. What is your art? Well-doing. And how else can this come from sound general principles regarding nature as a whole, and the constitution of man in particular? First of all, tragedy was introduced to remind us that certain events happen, and are fated to happen as they do, and to teach us that what entertains us on the stage should not grieve us on the greater stage of the world. You see that such things must be accomplished, and that even they bore them who cried aloud, O Citharon! Our dramatic poets have said some excellent things, especially the following: Me and my children, if the gods neglect, it is for some good reason. And again, vain is all anger at external things. And to reap our life like ears of ripened corn, and the like. And after tragedy came the old comedy, using a schoolmaster's freedom of speech, and employing plain language with great profit to inculcate the duty of humility. To this end Diogenes used a method much the same. Next consider the nature of the middle comedy, and lastly for what purpose the new was introduced, which gradually degenerated into the mere ingenuity of artificial mimicry. It is well known that some useful things were said by the new comic writers, but what useful end had they in view in all their accumulated poetry and playmaking? How manifest it is that no other course of life was more adapted to the practice of philosophy than that which is now yours. A branch cut off from its adjacent branch must necessarily be severed from the whole tree. Even so, a man parted from any fellow man has fallen away from the whole social community. Now a branch is cut off by the same external agency, but a man by his own action separates himself from his neighbor, by hatred and aversion, unaware that he has thus torn himself away from the universal polity. Yet there is always given us the good gift of Zeus, who founded the great community, whereby it is in our power to be reingrafted on our kind, and to become once more natural parts completing the whole. Yet the frequent happening of such separations makes the reunion and restoration of the separated member more and more difficult. And in general, a branch which has grown from the first upon a tree, and remained a living part of it, is not like one which has been cut and reingrafted. As the gardeners would say, they are of the same growth, but of different persuasion. As those who oppose you in the path of right reason have no power to divert you from sane action, so let them not turn you away from amenity toward themselves. Be watchful alike to persist in stable judgment and action, and in meekness toward those who would hinder or otherwise molest you. It is equally weak to grow angry with them or to desist from action and submit to defeat. Both are equally deserters, he who runs away and he who refuses to stand by friend and kinsman. Nature cannot be inferior to art. The arts are but imitations of nature. If this be so, that nature, which is the most perfect and comprehensive of all, cannot be inferior to the best artistic skill. Now all arts use inferior material for higher purposes. So also then does universal nature. Hence the origin of justice, from which again the other virtues spring. Justice cannot be preserved if we are solicitous about things indifferent, if we are easily deceived, rash, and changeable. If those things, the pursuit and avoidance of which trouble you, come not to you, but as it happens you go to them, then let your judgment be at peace concerning them. They will remain motionless, and you will no more be seen pursuing or avoiding them. The sphere of the soul attains to perfect shape when it neither expands to what is without, nor contracts upon what is within, neither wrinkles nor collapses, but shines with the radiance whereby it discerns the truth of all beings, both without itself and within. Does any man condemn me? Let him look to that, and let me look to it that I be found doing or saying nothing worthy of his contempt. Does any one hate me? That is his affair. I shall be kind and good-natured to every one, and ready to shew his mistake to him that hates me, not in order to upbraid him or to make a show of my patience, but from genuine goodness, like Phocion, if he indeed was sincere. Your inward character should be such that the gods may see you neither angry nor repining at anything. What evil is it for you now to act according to your nature, and to accept now what is seasonable to the nature of the universe? You, a man appointed to do some service for the common good. Although they despise, yet they flatter one another. Although they desire to overtop, yet they cringe to one another. How rotten and insincere in his profession who says, I mean to deal straightforwardly with you. What are you doing, man? There is no need for such a preface. It will appear of itself. Such a profession should be written clearly on your forehead. A man's character should shine forth clearly from his eyes, as the beloved sees that he is so in the glances of those that love him. The straightforward good man should be like one of rank odor who can be recognized by the passer as soon as he approaches, whether he will or no. The ostentation of straightforwardness is the knife under the cloak. Nothing is baser than a wolf friendship. Shun it above all things. The good, straightforward, kindly man bears all of these qualities in his eyes, and is not to be mistaken. To live the best life is within the power of the soul, if it be indifferent to indifferent things, and it will be indifferent if it looks on all such things severally and wholly with discrimination, mindful that not one of them can impose upon us an opinion of concerning itself, or can come of itself to us. Things stand motionless without, and it is we that form opinions about them within, and, as it were, write these opinions upon our hearts. We may avoid so writing them, or if one has crept in unawares, we may instantly blot it out. 'Tis but for a short time that we shall need this vigilance, and then life will cease. For the rest, why should we hold this to be difficult? If it be according to nature, rejoice in it, and it will become easy for you. If it be contrary to nature, search out what suits your nature, and follow it diligently, even though it be attended with no glory. For every man will be forgiven for seeking his own proper good. Consider whence each thing came, of what it was compounded, into what it will be changed, how it will be with it when changed, and that it will suffer no evil. As to those who offend me, let me consider. First, how am I related to mankind? That we are formed, the one for the other, and that, in another respect, I was set over them as the ram over the flock, and the bull over the herd. Consider yet more deeply thus. There is neither an empire of atoms or an intelligent nature governing the whole. If the latter, the inferior beings are created for the superior, and the superior for each other. Secondly, consider what manner of men they are at table, in bed, or elsewhere, and especially by what principles they hold themselves bound, and with what arrogance they entertain them. Thirdly, if they act rightly, we ought not to take it amiss, and if not rightly, manifestly they do so without intention and in ignorance. For no soul is willingly deprived of truth, or of the faculty of treating every man as he deserves. Accordingly, men are grieved to be called unjust, ungrateful, greedy, and, in short, sinners against their neighbors. Fourthly, you yourself do often sin, and are no better than another. And if you abstain from certain sins, still you have the disposition to commit them, even if through cowardice, fear of your character, or other meanness, you hold back. Fifthly, you cannot even be perfectly sure that wrong has been done, for many things admit of justification. And generally speaking, a man must have learned much before he can pronounce surely upon the conduct of others. Sixthly, when you are vexed or worried overmuch, remember that man's life is but for a moment, and that in a little we shall all be laid to rest. Seventhly, it is not the acts of others that disturb us. Their actions reside in their own souls. Our own opinions alone disturb us. Away with them, then. Will that you entertain no thought of calamity befallen you, and the anger is gone. But how remove them? By reasoning that there is no dishonor. For if you hold not that dishonor alone is evil, verily you must fall into many crimes, you may become a robber or any sort of villain. Eighthly, how much worse evils we suffer from anger and grief about certain things than from the things themselves about which these passions arise. Ninthly, meekness is invincible if it be genuine, without simper or hypocrisy. For what can the most insolent men do to you, if you persist in civility towards him? And if occasion offers, admonish him gently and deliberately. Shew him the better way at the very moment that he is endeavoring to harm you. Nay, my son, we were born for something better. No hurt can come to me. It is yourself you hurt, my son. And point out to him delicately, and as a general principle, how the matter stands, that bees and other gregarious animals do not act like him. But this must be done without irony or reproach, rather with loving kindness and no bitterness of spirit, not as though you were reading him a lesson or seeking admiration from any bystander, but as if you designed your remarks for him alone, though others may be present. Remember these 9 precepts as gifts received from the Muses, and begin now to be human for the rest of your life. Beware equally of being angry with men and of flattering them. Both are unsocial and lead to mischief. In all anger, recollect that wrath is not becoming to a man, but that meekness and gentleness, as they are more human, are also more manly. Strength and nerves and courage are the portion of the meek and gentle man, and not of the irascible and impatient. For the nearer a man attains to freedom from passion, the nearer he comes to strength. A weak man in grief is like a weak man in anger. Both are hurt, and both give way. If you want a 10th gift, from the leader of the Muses, take this. To expect the wicked not to sin is madness. It is to expect an impossibility. But to allow them to injure others, and to forbid them to injure you, is foolish and tyrannical. There are 4 states of the soul against which you must continually and especially be upon your guard, and which, when detected, should be effaced by remarking thus of each. This thought is unnecessary. This tends to social dissolution. You could not say this from your heart, and to speak otherwise than from the heart you must regard as the most absurd conduct. And fourthly, whatever causes self-reproach is an overpowering or subjection of the diviner part within you to the less honorable and mortal part, the body, and to its grosser tendencies. The serial and igneous parts of which you are compounded, although they naturally tend upwards, nevertheless obey the general law of the universe, and are retained here in composition. The earth and humid parts of you, though they naturally tend downwards, are nevertheless supported and remain where they are, although not in their natural situation. Thus the elements, wheresoever placed by the superior power, obey the whole, waiting till the signal shall sound again for their dissolution. Is it not grievous that the intellectual part alone should be disobedient and fret at its function? Yet is no violence done to it, nothing imposed contrary to its nature. Still it is impatient and tends to opposition. For all its tendencies toward injustice, debauchery, wrath, sorrows, and fears are so many departures from nature. And when the soul frets at any particular event, it is deserting its appointed station. It is formed for holiness and piety toward God, no less than for justice. These last are branches of social goodness even more venerable than the practice of justice. He whose aim in life is not always one and the same cannot himself be one and the same through his whole life. But singleness of aim is not sufficient, unless you consider also what that aim ought to be. For as there is no agreement or opinion regarding all of those things which are reckoned good by the majority, but only as regards some of them, such as are of public utility, so your aim should be social and political. For he alone who directs all his personal aims to such an end can reach a uniform course of conduct, and thus ever be the same man. 22. Remember the country mouse and the town mouse, and how the latter feared and trembled. Socrates called the maxim of the vulgar hobgoblins, boogies to frightened children. The Spartans at their public shows set seats for strangers in the shade, but sat themselves where they found room. Socrates made this excuse for not going to Perdiccas upon his invitation, lest I should come to the worst of all ends by receiving favors which I could not return. In the writings of the Ephesians there is a precept frequently to call to remembrance some of those who cultivated virtue of old. The Pythagoreans recommended that we should look at the heavens in the morning, to put us in mind of beings that go on doing their proper work uniformly and continuously, and of their order, purity and naked simplicity, for there is no veil upon a star. Think of Socrates clad in a skin, when Xanthippe had taken his cloak and gone out, and what he said to his friends, who were ashamed, and would have left him when they saw him dressed in such an extraordinary fashion. In writing and reading, you must be led before you can lead. Much more is this so in life. Yourself a slave, your speech cannot be free. And my heart laughed within me. Virtue herself they blame with harshest words. To look for figs in winter is madness, and so it is to long for a child that may no longer be yours. Epictetus said that when you kiss your child, you should whisper within yourself, "Tomorrow perhaps he may die." Ill-omened words, say you. The words have no evil omen, says he, but simply indicate an act of nature. Is it evil omen to say the corn is reaped? The green grape, the ripe cluster, the dried grape are all changes, not into nothing, but into that which is not at present. No man can rob you of your liberty of action, as has been said by Epictetus. He tells us also that we must find out the true art of assenting, and in treating of our impulses, he says that we must be vigilant in restraining them, that they may act with proper reservation, with public spirit, with due sense of proportion. Also that we should refrain utterly from sensual passion, and not be restive in matters where we have no control. The contention is not about any chance matter, said he, but as to whether we are insane or sane. What do you desire, says Socrates, to have the souls of rational beings or of irrational? Rational. Rational of what kind, virtuous or vicious? Virtuous. Why then do you not seek after such souls? Because we have them already. Why then do you fight and stand at variance? End of the 11th book.
Book 12 of the Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus by Marcus Aurelius. Translated by George Crystal, 1888 to 1944. Book 12. 1. All that you desire to compass by devious means is yours already, if you will but freely take it. That is to say, if you will leave behind you all that is past, commit the future to Providence, and regulate the present in piety and justice. In piety, that you may love your appointed lot, for nature gave it to you, and you to it. In justice, that you may speak the truth without constraint or guile, that you may do what is lawful and proper, that you may not be hindered by the wickedness of others, or by their opinion or their talk, or by any sensation of this poor surrounding body, for the part concerned may look to that. If then, now that you are near your exit, setting behind you all other things, you will hold alone in reverence your ruling part, the spirit divine within you. If you will cease to dread the end of life, but rather fear to miss the beginning of life according to nature, you will be a man, worthy of the ordered universe that produced you. You will cease to be a stranger in your own country, gaping in wonder at every daily happening, caught up by this trifle or by that. 2. God beholds all souls bare and stripped of these corporeal vessels, husk and refuse. By his intelligence alone, he touches that only which has been instilled by him and has emanated from himself. If you would but inure yourself to do the like, you would be eased of many a torment. For he who regards not the surrounding flesh will not waste his leisure in thinking about vesture, house, or fame, or other mere external furniture or accoutrement. 3. 3 parts there are of which you are compact: body, soul, intelligence. Of these, the 2 first are yours insofar as they must have your care. The third only is properly your own. And if you will cast away from yourself, that is, from your mind, all that others do or say, all that you yourself have done or said, all your fears for the future, all the uncontrollable accompaniments of the body that envelops you and of its congenital soul, and all that is whirled in the besieging vortex that races without, so that your intellectual power, made pure and set above the accidents of fate, may live its own life in freedom, just, resigned, veracious. If, I repeat, you cast out from your soul all comes of excessive attachment either to the past or to the future, then you will become, in the words of Empedocles, a faultless sphere, rejoiced in endless rest. You will study to live the only life there is to live, to wit, the present, and you will be able, till death shall come, to spend what remains of life in noble tranquillity, at peace with the spirit within. 4. I have wondered often how it comes that, while every man loves himself beyond all others, yet he holds his own opinion of himself in less esteem than the opinion of others. Yet, if a god or some wise teacher came and ordered a man to conceive and design nothing which he would not utter the moment it occurred to him, he would not abide the ordeal for a single day. Thus, we stand in greater awe of our neighbor's opinion of us than we do of our own. 5. How can it be that the gods, who have ordered all things well for man's advantage, overlooked one thing only, to wit, that some of the best of mankind, who have held the closest relations with things divine, and by pious works and holy ministry become intimate with the divinity, once dead, should arise no more, but be altogether extinguished? If this be truly so, be well assured that, if it ought to have been otherwise, they would have made it otherwise. Had it been right, it would have been practicable, and had it been according to nature, nature would have effected it. From its not being so, if it really be not so, be persuaded that it ought not to have been. You see that in debating this matter you are pleading a point of justice with the gods. Now, we would not thus plead with the gods were they not perfectly good and just. And if they are so, they have left nothing unjustly and unreasonably neglected in their administration. 6. Essay even tasks that you despair of executing. The left hand, which in other things is of little value for want of use, yet holds the bridle more firmly than the right, for in this it has practice. 7. Consider how death ought to find you, both as to body and as to soul. Think of the shortness of life, of the eternities before and after, and of the infirmity of all material things. 8. Contemplate the fundamental causes stripped of disguises. Think what pain is, what pleasure is, what death, and what fame. Consider how many are themselves the causes of all the disquiet that they suffer, how no man may be hindered by another, how all is matter of opinion. 9. In the use of principles, we should be like the pugilist rather than the swordsman. For when the latter drops the sword which he uses, he is undone. But the former has his hand always by him, and needs but to wield it. 10. Consider well the nature of things, distinguishing between matter, cause, and purpose. 11. What a glorious power is given to man, never to do any action of which God will not approve, and to welcome whatever God appoints for him. 12. As to what happens in the course of nature, the gods are not to be blamed. They never do wrong, willingly or unwillingly. Neither are men to be blamed, for they do no wrong willingly. There is therefore none to blame. 13. How ridiculous and how like a foreigner is he who is surprised at anything which happens in life! 14. There is either a fatal necessity, an unalterable order, or a placable providence, or a blind confusion without a governor. If there be an unalterable necessity, why strive against it? If there be a providence admitting of propitiation, make yourself worthy of the divine aid. If there be an ungoverned confusion, be comforted, seeing that in this tempest you have within yourself a guiding intelligence. And if the wave should carry you away, let it carry away the carcass and the animal life, for the intellectual part of you it will not carry away. 15. If the light of a lamp shine, and lose not its radiance until it be extinguished, shall truth, justice, and temperance be extinguished in you before your own extinction? 16. When you have the impression that a man has sinned, say to yourself, how do I know that this is sin? And if he has sinned, consider that he stands self-condemned, and thus, as it were, has torn his own face. He that would wish the wicked not to sin is like one who would have the fig tree not have juice in its figs, would have infants not cry, horses not neigh, and other inevitable things not happen. What shall the wicked man do, having a wicked disposition? If you are so keen, cure it. 17. If a thing be not becoming, do it not. If not true, say it not. 18. Endeavor always to see in everything what it is that causes your impression, and unfold it by distinguishing the cause, the matter, the relation to other things, and the period within which it must cease to exist. 19. Perceive at last that there is within you something better and more divine than the immediate cause of your sensations of pleasure and pain. Something, in short, beyond the strings which move the puppet. What is now my thought? Is it fear, suspicion, lust, or any such passion? 20. In the first place, let nothing be done at random or without an object. In the second, let your object never be other than the common good. 21. Yet a little, and you shall be no more. Nor shall any of these things remain which you now behold, nor any of those who are now living. It is the nature of all things to change, to turn, and to corrupt, in order that other things may, in their course, spring out of them. 22. Reflect that everything is matter of opinion, and opinion rests with yourself. Suppress then your opinion what time you will, and like one who has doubled the cape and reached the bay, you will have calm and stillness everywhere, never a wave. 23. Any one natural operation, ending at its proper time, suffers no ill by ceasing, nor does the agent therein suffer any ill by its thus ceasing. In like manner, as to the whole series of actions, which is life, if it ends in its season, it suffers no ill by ceasing, nor is he who thus completes his series in any evil case. The season and the term are assigned by nature, sometimes even by your own nature, as in old age, but always by the nature of the whole, by the interchange of whose parts the universe still remains fresh and in its bloom. Now, that is always good and seasonable which is advantageous to the nature of the whole. Wherefore, the ceasing of life cannot be evil to the individual. There is no turpitude in it, since it is beyond our power, and contains nothing contrary to the common advantage. Nay, it is good, since it is seasonable and advantageous to the whole, and congruent with the order of the universe. Thus, too, he is led by God who goes the same way with God, and that by like inclination. 24. Have these three thoughts always at hand. First, as to your action, do nothing inconsiderately, or otherwise than justice herself would have acted. As for external events, they either happen by chance or by providence. Now, no man should quarrel with chance or censure providence. Second, examine what each thing is, from its seed to its quickening, and from its quickening to its death, of what materials it is composed, and into what it will be resolved. Third, reflect that could you be raised on high, and from thence behold all human affairs, you would discern their great variety, conscious at the same time of the crowds of serial and ethereal inhabitants around us. But were you so raised ever so often, you would always see the same things, all uniform and of brief duration. Can we set our pride on such matters? 25. Cast away opinion, and you are saved. Who then hinders you from casting it away? 26. When you fret at anything, you have forgotten that all happens in accordance with the nature of the universe, and that the wrong done was another's. This, too, that whatever happens has happened, and will happen, and is now happening everywhere. You have also forgotten how great is the bond between any man and all the human race, a bond not of blood and seed, but of common intelligence. You have forgotten that the intelligence of every man is divine, and an efflux from God. Also, that no man is proprietor of anything. His children, his body, his very life are given of God. You have forgotten, too, that everything is matter of opinion, and that It is the present moment only that one can live or lose. 27. Bring to frequent recollection those who have grieved about anything overmuch, those who have been preeminent in the extreme of glory or misfortune, in feuds or other circumstances of fate. Then stop and ask, where are they all now? Smoke and ashes, and an old tale, or perhaps not even a tale. Pass them all in review. Fabius Catulinus in the country, Lucius Lupus in his gardens, Stertinius at Baiae, Tiberius at Capreae, Velius Rufus, and, in fine, all eminence attended with the high regard of men. How cheap is all that is so eagerly pursued! And how much better does it become a philosopher to show himself, in the part of the material world allotted to him, just, temperate, and obedient to the gods, and this with simplicity, for most intolerable of all is the pride of false humility. 28. To those who ask, where have you seen the gods, and how assured yourself of their existence, that you worship them, make this reply. First, they are visible, even to the eye. Again, my own soul I cannot see, and yet I reverence it. Thus, too, as regards the gods, I continually feel their power, and so I know that they exist, and I worship them. 29. The safety of life is to see the whole nature of everything, and to discern the matter and the form of its constitution. Also, to do justice with all your heart, and to speak the truth. What remains but to enjoy life, adding one good to another, so as not to lose the smallest interval? 30. There is but one light of the sun, although it be scattered upon walls and hills and a myriad other objects. There is but one common substance, although it be divided among 10,000 bodies having as many different qualities. There is but one soul, though it be distributed among countless different natures and individual forms. There is but one intelligent spirit, though it may seem to be divided. The other parts of these individuals of which we have spoken, such as breath and matter, are void of perception and of mutual affection. Yet even they are held together by the intelligent spirit, and gravitate together. But intelligence has a special tendency to its kind, and unites therewith, and the community of feeling is not broken. 31. What do you desire? To live on? Or is it to feel or to desire? To grow and to decay again? To speak or think? Which of all these seems worthy to be desired? And if each and all of them is despicable, proceed to the last that remains, to follow reason and God. Now, it is repugnant to reverence for reason and for God, to grieve at the loss by death of these other despicable things. 32. How small a part of the boundless immensity of the ages is allotted to each of us, and presently that will vanish in eternity! How little is ours of the universal substance! How little of the universal spirit! On what a little clod of the whole earth do we creep! Considering all this, reckon nothing great except to act as your nature leads you, and to endure what universal nature brings to pass. 33. How is it with your ruling part? On this all depends. All other things, within or without our control, are but corpses, dust, and smoke. 34. This, most of all, must rouse you to despise death, that even those who held pleasure to be good and pain to be evil nevertheless despised it. 35. To him who holds that alone to be good which comes in proper season, who cares not whether he has acted oftener or less often according to right reason, to whom it makes no difference whether he behold the universe for a longer time or a shorter, for this man death also has no terror. 36. You have lived, O man, as a citizen of this great city. Of what consequence to you, whether for 5 years or for 3? What comes by law is fair to all. Where, then, is the calamity, if you are sent out of the city by no tyrant or unjust judge, but nature herself, who at first introduced you, just as the praetor who engaged the actor again dismisses him from the stage? But, say you, I have not spoken my 5 acts, but only 3. True, but in life 3 acts make up the play. For he sets the end who was responsible for its composition at the first, and for its present dissolution. You are responsible for neither. Depart then graciously, for he who dismisses you is gracious. End of Book 12. Recording by Linda Johnson. End of The Meditations of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus by Marcus Aurelius. Translated by George Crystal, 1888 to 1944.